All right. Rachel and Emilio, the Relationship Renegades. Welcome to the Biohacker Babes. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We're so excited to bring this conversation to our audience. Emilio, I think I first met you at the Biohacking Conference maybe 2 years ago, and then we got to work at Elias's Healthspan Summit last year together and stay in a wild, crazy Airbnb together.
Loved it.
Some fun times, but now we finally get to have you on the podcast. And I love what you guys are doing. You are doing amazing work in helping people build meaningful connections with other people. And I love that you, in your bio, said it's the ultimate biohack. And I would agree. And I would say it's also maybe the missing biohack for a lot of people. Because in the biohacking space, I think some people get really tied to the technology and the data and quantifying everything, that then they forget to like go out and socialize and be human. And so you guys are really bringing that to the space. So I love what you're doing. I'm excited to bring this to the audience. And I think to kick it off, it's really important to connect why this is important for health. And you guys did a great presentation at the Healthspan Summit last year. And I think there was maybe a study from Harvard, something like that you guys can talk about, where they actually were able to confirm that strong social connections increase longevity, health span. So kick us off with that. Like, what's the connection to health here?
Yeah. Where do you want to
kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'll start off, given that this podcast about biohacking, wellness, health span, all these things, I think as biohackers, we've been biohackers for 14, 15 years individually, in our own journeys. And, we often look at research and science and all the different things as we do as biohackers. And so, where we connected again at where we were doing an anti-aging relationships speaking engagement there. We did reference a Harvard study that was the longest human development study ever done. It was an 80-year-long study where they tracked, hundreds of people over 80 plus years, still doing it with the second and third generations. But they came out with a lot of things. All the research and scientists there, decade by decade, continued this, right? And these people were analyzed physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, just in all ways, thorough analysis, all the labs, diagnostics, testing, psychology, neurological tests, like everything. And they wanted to find out what enabled us to live a long, healthy, happy life. And in the very beginning, they thought it was going to be genetics and long-lived ancestors and all these things. And time again, decade after decade, as different scientists and researchers continued the study, they found out, shockingly over and over, was that the number one thing was actually relationships.
Yes.
And we can start to maybe hit on some of those topics. There was a lot of things that came out from this study. For instance, let's say people that were satisfied in their marriages, like at age 50, and that they had healthy, warm relationships were, healthier at age 80 going forward. That they found out that, strong, social support from friends and family, when they had those strong connections, it would actually have a protective shield over the brain and would actually help less mental deterioration as they aged. And so there was a lot of biomarkers that they talked about, whether it was from our brain health, our physical health, the gut health, all these different things that was like, oh, wow, when you did have these healthy, strong relationships, this is what happened. And when you didn't, there was more emotional pain, there was more mood, there was more, all these things as they aged, right?
And that warm relationships, and it's really important to define what that means. Warm relationships doesn't just mean intimate relationships, but relationships of all kinds. Even the small interactions that we make, meaningful interactions with our Uber driver or our cashier or our friends and family, or just strangers walking down the street, being able to look someone in the eye and say, hey, have you, just some sort of meaningful interaction that I think our world is really struggling with because of the digital age that we live in. That those warm relationships were one of the number one stress regulators that helped get our body out of a state of inflammation and back into a state of peace and ease. And in that state, we know that we age less. And a person hearing this might be like, well, duh, like you feel good when you're with your friends, but I think, they also did this survey, they surveyed millennials, and the main focus of those millennials was to get rich and to be famous.
Yeah.
And there was no
The majority of
focus
society right now.
of like, hey, I want to be in a healthy, warm, happy relationship. I want to, nothing like that. And, rightfully so, we don't really have a lot of that in our education or even in media. It's the exact opposite. And I feel so passionate about this message because I was that person that would have answered those questions of like, yeah, I want to maybe not say particularly rich and famous, but basically. And I just got this message that the harder I worked, the happier and healthier and more loved I would be, the more successful I would be, therefore the more loved I would be. And I worked my freaking ass off every day to the point where I would get invited to go to lunches with friends or hangouts or whatever, and I would judge them. I would be like, I don't have time for you. Like, I have to work. I have dreams I am accomplishing. And I literally thought that they were like lazy or just like missing the ball. And I got that like hustle message and like, you don't need sleep when you die, like, and you don't need friends, like they're just gonna waste your time and like just all that stuff. And I did achieve some pretty incredible things. I ended up achieving my major childhood dream of being in TV and film and acting in movies. But what was crazy, and what pretty much anyone will tell you that has accomplished any sort of dream come true situation, is that it's great for a moment and it feels awesome for a little bit, and then you experience this extreme drop where if you don't have those warm relationships and a strong social support, you experience what I experienced was a lot of loneliness, a lot of anxiety, a lot of like deep longing for this void that I didn't know how to fill, because I kept trying to fill it with boyfriends or whatever other things that ended up in like very toxic, unhealthy situations because I didn't know how, because nobody ever really, I didn't learn in school. Most of us don't learn it from our parents. And it's just a really big world problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, you touched on so many very powerful points already and answered so many questions that were coming up as you were talking. What do you think is the balance then? Because I think you probably resonated with a lot of people. They're like, oh yeah, that's me. Either I'm the workaholic and don't choose social relationships, or I'm the person that maybe considers myself lazy and I'm not going to do the work stuff because I would prefer that. That makes sense that like we're not being modeled that through our parents and the educational system, but how do we find the right balance for us individually? Because I assume it's going to look different for everyone. So how do we want to decide what that is? And then how do we make peace with that, depending on what the percentage should be for us?
Yeah. There's something coming up.
Yeah, go for it. I'll talk after.
Yeah. I was like, that hits hard for me because of just some client interaction I just had. And I'll make a bold statement and kind of unravel it. I believe that we're only always dealing with ourselves. I think, we often talk about in our relationship playground events, we do these trigger sketches that we were talking earlier here with Juan Pablo, my character and whatnot. But, I think when we think about balance, if we're only always dealing with ourselves, right? Like if I get triggered with Rachel, or you guys, or you girls, or a friend, or a client, or anybody, or someone on the road, it's a gift. And there's ways that we talk about that. But before kind of hitting on that, I think going back to the question, then I'll kind of expand on it. I think the balance for us, we always talk about, when I think you're only always dealing with yourself, I think about like a cup, right? And the more that we choose ourselves in a healthy way, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the more that we choose to do things that light us up, more of our purpose, our passion, things that we love, it's like filling up your cup. And when that fills up, it starts to overflow into all your relationships. When I think balance, I think the balance that we practice, because we're not perfect, is to how can we choose ourselves in a healthy way so that, by help, like to show up for Rachel is to show the best way that I can show up for Rachel is to show up for me. Because if I show up for me and I fill up my cup and I feel good, then that overflow can go to Rachel. And so same thing with friends and family and everything else. So when we think about relationships with the balance, I think, why not flip the script? Why not change the conversation of like, hey, as biohackers, we know that habits are everything, right? What morning routines, night routines, like how can we shift or adjust in this chapter? And maybe after hearing this podcast, like, okay, well, wow, the 80-year-long study said relationships are most important. How can I tweak some of my things to incorporate more time for me, more time for friends, more time for family? It doesn't have to be long, but meaningful, quality time that then fills your cup. And when you're feeling good, guess what, right? It's not a secret. It's not a hidden secret that like you start to attract more things. You start to vibrate more. You're at a higher frequency. People are like, wow, I want to be around you. and more abundant things start happening with the success that you want, with the dreams that you're trying to accomplish. So I think that's what's coming up for me is how can you choose in a healthy way yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, because that will then translate to everything else.
And tagging onto what he said, what's super interesting is that we can get in this mode of like, I have to work and I have to crush and I have to be behind a screen all day. And granted, there is like a time and place for that. There's also this other kind of mentality is that person that you might be needing to meet that would exponentially grow your business, like might be at that coffee shop right across the street. And they might be in line next to you. And if you had that habitual habit of just connecting with the person next to you rather than like going to your phone, you spark a conversation with them that's a meaningful connection. All of a sudden, you end up meeting someone that could do like so much more than you could have ever done behind a screen.
Totally.
And so I think it is kind of having that balance. And I'm always about, you know, there is no one right way, and we all need to figure out what works best for our unique makeup because we're all so different. But checking in with yourself and being that scientist for yourself and experimenting with what does work for you in that balance of how can I set up my life so that I have enough time to work on the projects I want to work on, you know, with me behind a screen or whatever that looks like. And then how can I set up enough time where it's in the unknown, where I'm just literally going to different places to meet different people and I'm experimenting with talking to them in different ways. And even things like one of my girlfriends is doing a 30-day rejection challenge that I love. So getting really familiar with getting rejected every day and literally actively going to different places and people and things, asking on purpose something outlandish. And what I love about this, of course, for most people, it's like, oh, I can do that. It's terrifying. But it's amazing what happens. Like she's sharing some videos that like, she's like went to her landlord and was like, hey, can I have free rent and like upgrade to a better apartment, but for free? And the lady was like, well, it's possible, you know, like, and she was like, what, it's possible? Like, I don't know. And she ended up having these amazing interactions with strangers that she would have never had. And it does give you, I know, things like that. I think thinking about it as, you know, your connection fitness time, have just like you've had, you know, your workout time, have you had enough connection fitness with people on a regular basis?
Yeah. I mean,
so beautiful.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced all of that. Like, I feel like every time I'm like, I don't really want to go out tonight, but you know, my husband, Ryan, he's like social butterfly. He's like, let's go. I'm like, fine. And then I always meet someone or have some conversation that I'm so grateful for. And I had a funny experience recently. I was at a music festival and I'm in this long bathroom line and bored, just standing in this line. I started talking to the girl behind me. She is a biohacker, lives in Vegas. She's designing this new device, like biohacking device. She's an FDN practitioner like Lauren. Like we have all of these crazy connections. Maybe you guys even know her. She's so connected in the space and I had never met her, but it was just because I turned around in the line in the bathroom to start talking to a stranger. Like how weird is that?
Love that.
Yeah. But I think with the idea of like being productive, and I can totally relate to like, I can't go out and have a lunch date. I'm working. I don't take lunch. Like, well, what are you doing that you can take a lunch break kind of thing? But I think some of that is programmed as kids. And I know you guys talk a lot about this, whether it's like micro trauma, macro trauma, but just the programming that happens as kids. And I think Lauren and I are both kind of that way. We like to be productive. We like to be busy, and we've had to like kind of overcome that. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on like some of the programming that we maybe have to reprogram?
That's the name of the game right there.
That's a big question.
More of the unbecoming than even the becoming. That is there. And man, I've had to go on a wild ride to reprogram some of that stuff.
Oh yeah, because you know, you come into this world, right? Like you see kids, like they come and they're just like this ball of full love, and they're like, hey, let's play. Hey, let's go and energy. And they're full of love. And then like, whether it's the parents, friends, teachers, whoever, like, no, you're not supposed to do that, or no, you can't do that, or no, you can't love this person, or no, or you get heartbroken, or this happens. And it's slowly a dimming the light, is slowing the closing up the heart. That was like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I'm not supposed to talk to that person. Oh, wow, I got heartbroken. I don't want to have that happen again. And it's like this closure and closure and closure and separation from ourselves, from each other, from the world
Yes.
around us, to God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. And so I think when it comes to relationships, right, it's like, you know, I always, maybe you'd say a bold statement, unravel it, because there's so much to say. It's like, I think there's a thing about like surrendering to love. Like it's a surrender, because we're so closed off because of things that have happened into our life, whether we're dating, whether it's a friend, whether it's a business partner, we don't trust people. And it's challenging and it's scary, especially the world we live in with all the different topics out there. And it's like, but we're a lot of meaning and a lot of gratitude and a lot of like heaven on earth experiences with relationships, and all relationships can be felt and experienced. And it's an act of courage to surrender to the unknown and to be willing to get, it's risky, right? Quote unquote, because someone can hurt you and someone can, you know, do all these things. However, if you're not being courageous like that, I would argue that you're just not living fully. And because there's such a beauty to surrendering to the river. We were talking about river earlier. So it's like one of our favorite quotes is, don't fight the river, be the river. And when you allow, like, oh, now I'm at this coffee shop. Oh, I'm going to talk to this person. Oh, I met this person. Oh, here. Oh my God, you're amazing. And just to allow the river to take us. There's so many exciting routes down that river or up the mountain, whatever analogy you want to use. But I feel like when it comes to relationships and love and surrender, I think I love talking about these things because, you know, especially in our relationship, like if I surrender to my ego and just like own my shit and say, you know what, babe, I was doing that, you know, I was trying to, you know, whatever it was. And, you know, I'm just super stressed and I was being passive aggressive, or I shouldn't have said that, you know, and we have a game about that. I think the more that we can surrender to life and to our ego at times and to each other, it allows us to like find the, you know, the parallels and the common ground that all of us have.
Yeah.
You know, and it just goes back to another favorite quote. I think it's Rumi or Ramdas, but I love this thing of like, we're all just walking each other home. And to just, and if we saw it that way, like what would the world look like? What would your relationships look like if we had that mindset?
I know you said so much. I want to tag on that statement of courage. One of my favorite statements is to choose courage. That I always say, am I choosing courage? Am I choosing courage in this moment? And, you know, as biohackers, I think there's a lot of people that get really used to doing things like cold plunges, or they realize that they have to do things that might feel a little bit uncomfortable to get that effect that they're looking for, right? Whether it's fasting or cold plunges or you name it. I think it's looking at emotional triggers, like whenever you feel that feeling of like, oh, I feel triggered by this person or by this thing. You know, most of our patterns are to either suppress or deny or run away from those feelings that, you know, feel so uncomfortable. And what I love helping people invite them to see it as, to reframe it, is that these emotional triggers are just like cold plunges. Like if you allow yourself to just jump in and like feel the uncomfortability of it, like it sucks. It's hard. It's like not at all. But if you allow yourself to do that, and especially do some other things that he talked about, like owning your shit is a big one within when you're feeling triggered. If you allow yourself to jump in that uncomfortable feeling and sit with it for a minute and dive in and unravel, you know, the ugly wrapping paper, you will always find this amazing blissful feeling that is very similar to what it feels like when you get out of a cold plunge. And so I think that reframing can be so helpful because, you know, especially anything we practice, we get really good at. And most of us has practiced a lot running away from our triggers or suppressing them. And so of course it's going to feel different. Of course it's going to feel uncomfortable. What's helped my brain, we rewire that, even in the sense of like, oh, I don't want to step away from work, or I don't want to go to that thing because I just want to be like by myself right now. One, with that, I think there's like really getting good at having a chapter of focusing on boundaries, because that's really important. And most of us aren't very good at that. So learning how to have really healthy boundaries. And then having maybe a chapter where you're really focused on being out in the world and saying yes to things, and then experiencing, you know, putting together your own balance of that. So I kind of tackled many things in that, but emotional trigger emotional cold plunges, and to choose courage, and to, we can talk about this all day long, the whole concept of what you talked about, babe, of, we've done so many different events and speaking engagements, and we do workshops and whatnot. And the main thing that every single human struggles with, probably the most that we've learned through this, is being able to let love in.
That's a big one. Yeah. Like
most of us suck at it. Like to really what it feels like to be able to receive love. Most of us get this message that it's all about like giving love and doing things for others and be of service, and which is all great, but most of us suck at really receiving love, and that has a massive effect on a life if you never really allow yourself to receive love.
True.
Yeah, so many thoughts popping up around safety, everything that you guys have said. And as kids, we're taught that it's not safe, right? To be in our truth, or to question, or to step out of line. And so I think exactly what you said, Rachel, being courageous and believing that maybe that safety isn't as, or that believing that it's not going to be as scary as maybe we're anticipating it to be. And then practicing. So I'm curious, like, what are these little micro practices that we can bring into our everyday just to get, it's like riding a bike, right? Like we have to practice. It's not just going to happen overnight. How do we see this idea of being safe in a different way?
Yeah,
100%.
I feel so. That's actually like a one main theme, a big theme at Relationship Renegades is, if all else fails, sorry, somebody called me. It was an emergency call, but I think we're okay. So to that question, safety is a big thing, right, in relationships. And the main theme in Relationship Renegades is if people forgot everything that we had talked about, or principles or anything, right? It's one of the biggest things is, how can I make my partner feel safe, seen, heard, and loved? If all else fails, it's like, that's the go-to, that's the rule of thumb. Like, how can I have Rachel feel safe, seen, heard, and loved? And if there's an argument, if there's a heated debate, if there's something going on, the question that always comes to my mind, just because I've repped it, we believe everything's a muscle, is, okay, no matter if I'm wanting to be right, or wanting to prove a point, or wanting to do whatever, if I pause for a moment and just say, does Rachel feel safe right now? Does Rachel feel heard right now? Does she feel loved? Does she feel safe? Because this is my wife. This is the person I love. Why wouldn't I want her to feel these things? And because I know if that cup is full, everything else works. And, so I think about the balance, like, I really got to do this. I really got to do this. Well, if this isn't there, if this foundation isn't there and nurtured, you think about a skyscraper, right? If we're going to build a skyscraper, if you don't have a solid foundation, it's going to crash inevitably. It is going to fall over 5 years, 10 years, 30 years down the line. And so that when I think about foundation, I really think about safe, seen, heard, and loved. So to your point, so the safety, so I think practical tools or tips, right? So within Rachel and I.
Can I say something real quick about that?
Yeah, totally.
So safe, seen, heard, and loved, so freaking important.
Yeah.
One of the best ways to practice that, and I feel like we should probably all start, is with ourselves. Because it is near impossible to create a safe space for someone else if you don't know how to do it for yourself. And whether you're single or you're in a relationship, really going within yourself and asking, what kind of space am I creating for my soul to live in? And I know for most of my life, the space that I created within me was very anxious, and it was stressed, and it wasn't safe in there. And so doing that deep inner work, and that could look like, having a journaling practice. I know free writing for me has been just so freaking helpful. I think journaling gets really overlooked in the effectiveness that it can have. Granted, not all people are writers, so you have to find our own ways. For someone else, it might be having some sort of movement practice and sound practice where you're just blasting your favorite music and you're just moving and shaking your body and screaming out stuff that might be blocking you. Meditation, breath work, yoga, you name it. There's so many ways up the mountain. It really is finding your own things that work for you and being that experimenter for yourself. But I can't stress enough the proactive practice of how can you create a safer space within yourself so that you can hold space for other people. And this concept of, I think safe, seen, heard, and loved within more close relationships. But when it comes to the fear and the safety out in the world with strangers, Because there's two sides to this. I have this worldview, this story that like everybody's great and everybody's gonna love me and like I'm never in danger, you know. And I see the best in people and I love people and I just want to talk to them. And you know, yes, I have a very introverted side that also has my stuff, but you know, I think it's important to remember that because I was talking to a mentor and I got all this stuff about I was in a bad situation and then I trusted someone I probably shouldn't have. And I was like, but I was talking to my mentor and I was like, but I refuse to live in a world and feel jaded. Like I refuse to give that part of myself up because not talk to people and believe in possibilities and all these different things. And he said something that to me was really profound, was that you can love people, but trust has to be earned. Right. So out in the world, you can connect with a stranger and you can love people and you can, you know, hold space and you can communicate, you know, and practice that muscle of getting uncomfortable if that's really uncomfortable for you, in baby steps. I'm a huge believer in baby steps. So just start small and continue to build that muscle. But then also realize that, you know, when you're making new friendships or getting more in that space, that you can love people, but trust has to be earned. And that has to be earned over time, not just through words, but by actions. And that's something I'm still working on, honestly. So, but
And I think, you know, that was great, babe, about the safety, like externally and then internally as well. And, you know, in relationships, I think I help a lot of men with this, and it's just like the classic seeking to understand and also, you know, of course, the listening. But, you know, Rachel's not going to feel safe. Like if she's going through something and she's expressing, or maybe she's just venting, right? I think it can't be said enough, because we may know this as men or just as humans, what I'm about to say, but I think when in the heat of the moment, everything goes out the ears and it's just fight or flight, right? And it's so you know, if anybody has seen the classic, you know, it's not about the nail, you know, and the ladies, you know, the woman saying, you know, this is what's going on and this and that, and you know, men want to fix things. I think it can't be stressed enough that like if your partner is going through something, you know, it's just listen and really be empathetic, really seek to understand, because why not? You love this person, whether it's a friend, a business partner, you know, your intimate relationship. You know, we always have this theme of seeking to understand, and also this thing of like it makes sense. Like even recently, this is coming up for me a lot. So I have I had an argument with a long-term friend / we were getting in a business relationship. And I won't go through it all, but he said some things to me that triggered me, and I was aware of those feelings. But you know, when I just want to seek to understand, when I think about safety, I'm like, you know what? This person has a point. If I was him, I would be feeling the same way. And I don't like to hear that, but I'm going to acknowledge what he said. Like, you know what? You're right. It makes sense as to why you're feeling like that. I would actually feel the same, you know, and wanting him to be heard, or Rachel to be heard. Like, babe, that makes sense. Like, you know, you're right, you know, and I think that goes a long way. And that's a muscle to practice. Like you said, when in the heat of the moment, you don't want to do that, but you know, why not gamify this? Like we have a game actually with Rachel and I, that like the first one to own their shit, if we can guess here, is wins. And it's just kind of like, so it's this psychological kind of, the ego kind of wins, but doesn't, because we get closer together, because, you know, I quote unquote win if I say something first. Rachel quote unquote wins if she says it. But
owning your shit just means anytime, you know, usually when we're triggered or something happens, you know, both people could probably maybe own something, whether it's like, you know what, I really wasn't listening to you when you were talking. And I'm really sorry. Or, you know, like, man, I was being really passive aggressive there and I'm really sorry. And that is so freaking hard to do in the heat of the moment.
Or like, I'm being ridiculous right now. I'm just being ridiculous. Sorry, I'm just super stressed right now and I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say. And I don't, you know, and I think like when you're just real and saying like, here it is, like I'm creating these stories in my head. I know it's not me, but this is what's happening. Then I think the other person's like, oh wow, okay, this is real. Like you're really here, you're really listening, you really care, you're really sharing.
Well, it
There's some-
diffuses everything.
Yeah.
Like we've had moments.
And there's
where-
some safety
yes,
there though.
Yes.
There's some
Huge-
safety there, right? That foundation.
Yes. So if there is a practical muscle to try and rep, it's owning your shit. Honestly, it is.
Yeah.
It diffuses all the emotions so quickly. We
Yeah.
were in one of the hardest
Yeah.
disagreements, arguments, just chapters that we were in, and just you could feel this disconnection building between us. And I was like, how are we gonna get through this? And we were both using all our individual tools to do it and whatnot.
And she chose this podcast to own her stuff today, so it's maybe it's so awesome.
Here we go.
Wait, who gets the point there? Who wins?
Honestly, he got the
I'm
point.
just
He got the points on this one because that was in Utah.
When we were so
Yeah.
digital, yeah.
And it's such a long story, so I don't want to get into the whole thing, but there was a lot of, just a lot of heated emotions, a lot of misunderstandings, and a really complex issue.
Yeah.
And in like the heat of the moment, we are just like back and forth, like speaking very passionately to each other. He just takes a deep breath and he's like, I know this sucks right now so bad, babe, but I just want you to know that I'm so grateful for it because I know that it's going to make us even stronger. And we're going to fall more in love with each other once we figure this out, and we're going to have more understanding. And I'm so sorry we're going through it. And it sucks, but I'm just really grateful for it. And I was like, who says that?
That's
And
amazing.
it just diffused everything. And, then he went on to own some of his stuff, and it was just really freaking powerful. I was mind blown.
And Rachel does the same thing, it just depends, right, on the situation. We both do our best, and sometimes it's quick, and sometimes we know that, hey, babe, and we'll communicate, babe, feeling triggered, and we know that if I get triggered, it's my stuff. If she gets triggered, it's her stuff, and she knows to communicate with me, like, hey, I need some help with this, or I'm going to go to a friend, or I need just to be by myself for a while, and I have to respect that, and she respects that, and I think the communication obviously is the classic key, of course, but yeah. So there's safety.
With the triggering and the game of, who's going to win the game, does it typically happen right then and there? Or do you sometimes just like you said, you walk away, you go see a friend, and then maybe the game is won days later?
Yeah.
Does it take time?
I think everything looks different. And I think this is huge when it comes to, conflict resolution in general, is that everybody is different and we need different things, and different things work at different times for different people.
Yeah.
There are some things like tools, whether it's, taking a deep breath or seeking to understand or, checking in about safe, seen, heard, and loved, that can sometimes just work in that moment. Other times, it could be way more challenging. And, I will usually communicate, because it's also really important to know that when you feel triggered, I said that we are blind, deaf, and dumb. And it's true. There is this flood of adrenaline that rushes through our bodies that really doesn't enable us to see things very clearly.
Yeah.
As someone who, grew up dancing and movement is a big tool for me, a lot of times, I need to say, I really just need to go outside and move and work on me for a minute before we continue the conversation. And, he has to be able to respect that. And, he tells me something that he needs to go do, he needs to go talk to someone about it. That's not me. I have to be able to respect that. And sometimes that's hard, because sometimes, one person might be like, no, I need to figure it out right now. It really is this beautiful dance between knowing how to communicate what you're feeling from a space of love, being able to set healthy boundaries, and then also being able to respect the other person's boundaries if they're different from yours. And
even though it's hard, though, the mindset for me is just I'm just so grateful that there's a communication of hey, I need time by myself. I need to talk to somebody. It's we're growing through life together, and there's going to be the ups and downs. And I think, those times when we are triggered, we truly do see them as gifts. It's just another opportunity to find out what hasn't been healed within us yet. If you think about a trigger, it's like striking a tuning fork. Something happened and there's a resonance inside, and it's whoa, what is happening? And because there's something that hasn't been healed yet. And when you truly have been healed yet, if that same situation were to occur, there's nothing striking it. There's no tuning fork there. There's nothing. They're oh, wow. You're at a different playing field, a different awareness to see oh my gosh, You know, like if somebody hurt you, for instance, right? Like hurt people. And if you're at a higher awareness, you're not getting triggered. You're like, man, this person, there's compassion there. Like sending love to that person. They must be going through something. It's not about me. And you know, those things take time and there's muscles, right? So obviously, just like anything else, we see it as a muscle. If you're at the gym picking up 25 pounds over time, you can pick up 35, 45, 50. Same thing with this, right? The time, if you can see this, right? Like, you know, you may get triggered and you might kind of go below baseline, and it may take a long time to then get back up to par, to baseline. But the more that you rep this, you know, yeah, it can be quicker and quicker to resolve, because look, time is everything, whether it's in your business and your relationship. Time is like the number one asset. We can't get that back. And so we know the importance of time. And it's like, now we're to the point where like, look, babe, I'm happy to own my stuff now, because I'd rather be connected. I'd rather have heaven on earth. I'd rather be at peace with myself and Rachel. Like, it's just not worth it. And so obviously it took a lot of pain and suffering and reps in the mental, emotional gym, but it does get better. It can get better, because we do see it as a muscle. And it's not about like, oh, we're perfect, because, you know, new levels require different things. Maybe a lot more heavier weight, if you will. But yeah, it can be better, you know? And I think at Relationship Renegades, we're a renegade for a reason. I think there are stories in the collective consciousness that they say like, oh, relationships are hard. Oh, when you have kids, it's this. Oh, you were digital nomads? You couldn't do it with kids, man. Good thing you didn't do it with kids. There's just like stories.
Constructs,
you know, and it's not to say that like relationships aren't challenging. It can be challenging. But they can also be peaceful, playful, fully alive, and heaven on earth. And I think we're renegades because we want to ask people, right? Like, what do you feel is impossible in relationships? And how can we make that possible? Because that's just like anything, right? The 4-minute mile before was a 4-minute mile. Before we were like, hey, we're going to fly in the air all over the world. What, are you kidding me? Fly in the air?
Not possible.
Not possible.
Yeah.
It's possible, right? We're going to have a phone in our pockets, transacting business all over the world. That's impossible. Well, it's possible. So I think like Renegade is really like going against the grain. What is impossible in your mind, in our minds, about children, marriage, dating, relationships? And how can we renegade that? How can we choose differently? How can we think about a different narrative that maybe can help us flourish in life and relationships?
Yeah. I love that. Rachel, you said early on that we're pattern makers. And I think that's why we fall into that, right? Because we just know what we know. And so we cycle through the same narratives constantly. And I've had this question in the back of my mind since we started. I think the most curious thing, maybe not the most, a very curious thing about relationships is like the different movies that we each have in our minds, how like the realities cannot align when you're in relationship romantically or with friends. And I think the analogy is like, oh, I think that color is purple and you think it's blue. It's like we see through a different lens. What are like some actionables to kind of reconcile and understand that we're always going to have kind of our own lens and perspective? Like we can't really argue, no, it was this way, because we can acknowledge that we each see, feel, and hear things differently. How do you approach?
I love that question so much. I think the first thing to do is to communicate about it. Like communicate the way in, you know, it would be helpful to have a safe space, whether it's a friendship or a partner, you know, to be able to work to create a safe space together where you're able to sit down and really communicate how your stories, your belief systems, how you see the world, like, and give examples of like, hey, when this happened, this is how I perceived it. You know, you could weave in, obviously, love language is probably a big part of this, like how somebody actually feels and receives love can be very different from someone else. And it's as powerful as if you have two people that are speaking completely different languages. Like one person is speaking Spanish and the other person is speaking French, and they are not the same. You can't understand each other until what I do think real love is the capacity and the desire, because you love that person so much, to literally learn their language. Like if you're speaking French in your love language, you are learning Spanish.
Better learn French.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and vice versa. And I think if you don't have that desire or that to do so, then I would really question, I would question yourself a lot. But it is that different,
Yeah.
the way that we feel and receive love when it comes to our love languages. So I think I would definitely start there.
And I love that you brought up realities, because that's another big
Yes.
thing that we talk about a lot, like these realities versus actualities. Because yeah, everyone walking around is living in their own world with their own perceptions about everything. And I think what's really powerful is, and this even goes with triggers or gifts, now moving to realities versus actualities, it's like the number one human impediment is that we as humans live in our heads. Constant ego-centered, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough, or maybe I'm better than someone, mentalities. And so, or in the past, which is depression, future, anxiety, and never in the present moment. We're trying to be best to be in the moment, right? Because that's all that exists. Well, yes, we know that, but it's like the simple thing, right? The powerful reminder of like, well, just simply put, if we're up here in the head, then I'm not here. And if I'm literally up here in my head, creating a story of what I think is in front of me, or whether this is blue or purple, and I'm in my head, then I'm not in the moment. If I'm not in the moment, I'm not seeing the actuality of things. Even in relationship, like I may think I know Rachel. What, am I just gonna be like, I know Rachel for the next 80 years? I already know her. I already know who you are, Renee. I already know who you, Lauren. Like it doesn't allow me or you to have this beautiful, prosperous tree, the growing of a tree, right? Like we try to practice always removing what I believe you to be, Renee, or you, Lauren, or Rachel, or my friends or business partners, and allowing like, am I really seeing the person in front of me? Am I really seeing the person, place, or thing in front of me? Because usually it's the reality based on the programming. It's usually up in the head of who I think this person is, what the color is. And if I just surrender to that, let go, and be like, and get curious like a kid. Wow, I'm going to be in wonder and awe and curious. Ooh, I'm actually curious about you.
Really?
And I think through curiosity also helps create safety. Also creates kind of this like, this great connection, these warm relationships. Like this person actually cares about me. This person actually wants to see me fully. And I think that really helps, right? Because then I want to see actuality of the color, of the mountain, of the tree, of the person. And I think it's such a beautiful way to live that we try to practice as much as we can. And I think that also helps when it comes to relationships flourishing of all kinds.
And what, just tagging on to what he said, I think it's so important to remember that both when we're triggered, we're blind, deaf, and dumb, but also our judgments. Our judgments blind us. We are blind to the actuality of what's going on. All we're seeing is our quote unquote version of it, which is not the full truth. And so any judgment you have about anybody, and we are just judgment makers. Humans are walking through the world making judgments all the fucking time. Like,
because it creates safety, right? I mean, there's like a reason.
A very like kind of false sense of safety. You know what's interesting is that, you know, part of our mission is also to help people really see, you know, I think a lot of, especially in the biohacking space or wellness space, it's very much like, oh, it's meditation, it's journaling, it's technology, it's all these things, which are all great. But there's this other side of things, that these ancient tools like acting and storytelling, like creativity, like play, like sound and singing, like dancing. These are all ancient tools that people have been using since the beginning of time to be able to process powerful emotion, to be able to connect with other people. And I think, you know, what we especially as actors, entertainers, and filmmakers are really trying to bring this invitation to people to start reframing the way that they see those things, because our society has made it about like how good you are and how you look and being perfect at it, and you have to be good at it to do it. When, you know, dance and sound, whether it's singing or screaming, is so therapeutic. Also just playing characters. Like even if you didn't want to be an actor at all, but you're like, I want to try something else, and you didn't want to go to therapy, go to an acting class. Like it is you learn so much about yourself.
It's true.
And it's also one of the most powerful forms of meditation, because like when I'm doing a scene as an actor, I am in a completely different headspace. Most of our thoughts center around our own thoughts, our own struggles, our own worries, and it's just spins. I have gone into, practicing auditions, like feeling so like, oh, I hate life, just so like not there, not wanting to do it, not wanting to face the day, anything. And I practice this audition and I get myself in the zone, and I come out of it feeling so freaking blissful. And I think there's something to that. I just really hope that people get curious about that invitation.
Yeah.
Try it out.
I love that you brought up the acting. It's like, Rachel's been acting, she has an incredible story, right? When she moved to Hollywood when she was 18, pursuing a dream, like landed at all these things, right? She's been 50 plus TV film. Well, and it's a long story. We don't have to get into it, but like I got into acting in 2020 and it's been awesome in a lot of ways, growing in a lot of ways, kind of like what Rachel said. But it was very interesting to me because when we were talking about how the number one human impediment is that we live in our heads, right? It's almost like, to me, it started to really look like non-actors, just people walking around, were like the actors, and the actors were actually real people. And I'll dissect that really quickly. It was because, for safety reasons, Lauren, or for any other reason, right? We're in our heads creating a story in the past because our stories are running us, or we're hoping, wishing, praying of what's going to happen in the future, or we're judging someone or whatever it is. We're in the head, right? And what I found out, which I thought was so beautiful with taking acting class and all these things, is they have to be so in the moment by moment by moment. Like you say something to me, Lauren or Renee, and I have to like be so raw and real of like, whoa, that made me feel this way. And I have to react to it. Like it's just moment by moment interactions. And if you think about the A-list celebrities, actor winning awards, like things, they're not actors. If you're trying to cry or trying to be this kind of persona actor, it comes across as like, yeah, that guy looks like he's acting. It's the thing that standing ovation, the thing that's like, whoa, that was so real. It's because they were being real. They were literally in the moment, not acting their character. It like acting is to me not acting. It's literally just being so raw, real, human, present moment by moment. So it was so
vulnerable, like so vulnerable.
Yeah, so it was so interesting and beautiful to like kind of see it that way and then practice that more and more, whether it's in the auditions or in daily life of like, hey, am I being an actor or non-actor? Like, am I being the real person? Am I really? And it was just such a cool way of thinking.
And also real, just to tag on that, when it comes to thinking about the way that most humans live their life, we are all wearing masks. We're all playing parts. We're playing this character that we created, that we think is us. And most of the time it's so far from who we, maybe our real authentic self. And Jim Carrey says a really amazing quote that he often says, he's like, depression is actually deep rest from the characters that you've been playing your whole life that are actually not you at all. And this happens so much in relationships and dating because or friendships, like regardless, people, and I had this story big time, and it led to so many crazy situations and really unhealthy relationships where I so badly wanted love that I would do anything, say anything, be whatever they wanted me to be so that they would like me. And I was so scared of saying how I actually felt because I didn't want to hurt them, or I didn't want to lose them, or I didn't want to be alone, like all this stuff. And I had to go on my own hero's journey to like feel all the pain that whatever I had to go, feel, where I got so bad that I had to finally say like, enough is enough. I cannot do this anymore. This sucks. And it is more painful to live this way than it is to actually dive in and see who I really am and authentically and do my best to authentically live it. But that is a true hero's journey to go on. And I also think it happens at different chapters of life, especially as women, because we really go through we're cyclical beings. We're different, 4 different versions of ourselves every freaking month. And learning how to, not deal with that, but like optimize that is a whole thing. And then at different chapters of life, whether, male or female, and going into motherhood or all different things that maybe women go through or men go through, these chapters of life where someone might get stuck in a past identity that isn't who they are now, or they're, it's just a lot.
So much honor and respect for the women given that and everything else. Like, my gosh.
Thank you for that.
Seriously.
It's Renee's turn to talk, but I have to respond about acting and theater because I've been a performer my whole life. And I've done theater, so doing 8 shows a week, this just becomes so revealing when you see someone running on this program and doing the exact same thing 8 shows a week, and they're not exactly like you said, not responding, like they're just kind of stuck in this programmed cycle that's not real. And so that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, to not be in the moment. It's but you see that on the street in everyday life. And I don't mean to make this whole podcast about safety, but I think it is like this protective mechanism. Like if I just keep doing the same rigid thing all the time, that like illusion of safety. But you're right. Like if we can just breathe and be present, then we have more real, honest and raw experiences. But it's like, how do we get over ourselves enough to go like, it's going to be okay. Right?
Yeah. And I think, maybe I can only speak for myself, right? Like the hardest, craziest, life altering, all these different experiences in my life have been the biggest blessings. If I look back and like, wow, that taught me this, that got me here, that sent me to read that book, to send me to this conference, this intensive, to this whatever biohacking, conference, all these different things. And so I feel like, well, if I know that and I remind myself about that, and if I'm true to myself, like, okay, I'm not going to create safety, I'm going to just love myself enough to be truly myself. And then if that hurts somebody, if that triggers somebody, to have this realization that, oh, that's a gift. Because if I say something and I'm being 100% loving and saying my truth, and everyone has their own truth, and honoring that. And if that triggers somebody, great, wonderful. Because then guess what? That
Opportunity.
I'm so triggered, I'm going to go talk to my friend about this. And they talk like, oh my God, you should read that book. And then that book lends them to that conference, and that conference leads them to this, which leads them to then finding the relationship of their dreams. But it wouldn't have happened if the domino didn't get kicked with the trigger. So I think we owe it to ourselves and others that, like, if we all are walking each other home, being yourself, don't be afraid to, hurt someone, like not in a bad way, right, guys? Like, just like if something gets triggered or something like that, it's like, hey, I'm just loving myself to share my truth. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. Rather than walking on eggshells, like we never know what may be brought to us or where we'll go.
Yeah.
This is interesting timing, because my husband just had a really crazy interaction with a coworker yesterday. And I will say Ryan definitely triggered this coworker. And Ryan was standing up for himself. He was saying what he felt needed to be said. And this guy was just very triggered, ended up hanging up on him, calling higher ups at the company. Like, the whole thing is blowing up. So like, my question is, what if you trigger someone and they're not aware of this work or this idea of, the trigger being a gift? And now Ryan feels like terrible. He feels like a terrible person because he triggered this person that's really upset. But he also doesn't feel like he should apologize because he said what he wanted to say. So it's like, what do you do if you trigger someone and it's blows up like that?
Yeah, I have a very real recent story with this, and it was actually it was a very hard thing to go through, and it was something with my brother. It was, an very intimate relationship. And I had done something, it was basically the same story. I had done something that I felt good about, super triggered him. I mean, it was a hard decision I had to make, but it really triggered him. He didn't want to speak to me for months, and I don't want to get into it, the whole thing, but it was rough. It was really rough. But I think, sometimes we do have to allow space and time for things to unfold. And throughout that time, I really was aware of like, oh man, I'm feeling all this stuff in me, like anxiousness, kind of sick to my stomach. Like it was not good. And every day I would seek to my tools, whether it's breath work or, journaling or dancing or, hitting a bag or singing out, like screaming. I mean, I would do, or parts work or whatever it was, I was just reaching on all my tools in my toolbox to like navigate, knowing that like, okay, this has happened, can't change the past. Even though my mind wanted so badly, like, oh, if I would have done this different, like it would have been, and your mind can go down all these different paths. But the constant reminder of like, this is happening. I am in the cold plunge right now. Like, how am I going to handle it? How am I going to show up? And I love thinking about, what would my higher self do? What would my future self do? How would they view this situation? And, we can't ever control anybody else's responses ever. And that's not our job. And it's really hard to really own that and not let the monkey mind take over, and realize that these feelings that we're feeling are very real. They're wired into us through tribalism, because if you didn't agree with the tribe, you got kicked out, right? And then if you got kicked out, you died. So it's really this deep survival mechanism where we want people to like us. We want people to not think bad of us. And so I constantly had to remind myself of that, and to do my different tools every day, and to continue to ask for guidance, and to really check in, am I really showing up in the way I want to show up? Am I really speaking my truth? Am I really getting curious about how he's feeling and seeking to understand? And am I creating a safe space? And even though maybe I don't feel that I need to apologize in this moment for this thing, is there something else in my past that maybe I had? Because also things, especially in whether it's friendships, family relationships, intimate relationships, things compound over time. And a lot of times we don't realize that those things are compounding. And what sets off another trigger could have been a series of things beforehand. And so I had to check in, and for me in my story, it was after some space and time of asking him questions, seeing if he wanted to talk or if he wanted space. I can be here for you if you want to talk about it. I can also give you space. What do you need? He needed some space, so I had to just give him some space, and I had to do my own work to manage my own emotions during that chapter. And then after some time, I got some different downloads, aha moments that man, I really actually feel like I do want to apologize about some other stuff that was coming up from our past, and really seek to understand a little bit more. And I ended up saying some things to him about completely different situation, and it ended up really healing the whole situation, and we were able to be way closer than we ever had been before, because we understood each other on a level. And that's what's so cool, and I can't stress that enough, is the gift, is this deeper level of understanding and connection and love and bliss on a level that is just so much more. It is the after effect of the cold plunge that you get, and it's magical. You just really usually have to go through it first to be able to feel it after.
Yeah, and just to tag along on one thing you said, I think the surrender aspect again, everyone is on their own journey, and we can't save people. I had a huge savior complex based on how I grew up, and that was one of my biggest of the many breakthroughs, with the work to become just to have better relationships. And I think it's to surrender to the only thing I can control is how I react and how I want to show up. And I think I can only speak for myself. I don't know the full situation, Renee, but I have to always question myself, when I triggered somebody, was I coming from a place of ego that I'm right and I need to express this, that, or the other? Or was I coming, when I think about how can I be my full expression of myself and authentic to me, it would be being in a state of love. That, and how do I fill myself with love? I will, take some time to breathe. I will think about my nephew, my sister, my mom, Rachel, people that I love in my life, and really feel the love just take over, and really have that embodied. And from that place, if I say something to a person and that triggers somebody, I know that I did my part. I came from a state of love. Now, if I don't come up from a state of love, then there's an ego aspect of things, and I have to check myself. Did I say something that, regardless if I'm right or wrong, was it a place of non-love? And there's this interaction, because the way that I choose to live and we choose to live is we believe that love, as cheesy as that may sound, is what is the fertile soil that will grow the tree of relationships, of your life, of your growth. And if we're about to make a call or say something, it's I always practice it, and I'm not always great at it, but how can I get into that place and come from that place? Because if I'm not coming from that place, then things can get messy, And then I always have to do check in myself, like, hey, do I need to go back and say something? Do I go own my shit, or just allow the river to do what it needs to do and just surrender to that?
Great insight and advice on that. Thank you.
And I think it comes, please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think this really plays into a little challenge that we wanted to offer, invite your audience to, that we're about to start soon. It's called the 1, 2, 3 challenge. And when we're talking about like proactive practices, there's such
3, 3, 3.
Yes. What did I say?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
3, 3, 3.
3, 3, 3 challenge. That it's literally just a practice that you can do every day. And we're saying, to really try to do this for 30 days. And if people want to do this with us, they can just email us about it. But it's something that we practice, and it's been so monumental with us. Is so you blast music. First step is you blast music and you spend 3 minutes dancing, just in your house by yourself. Be as ridiculous as possible, and feel what that feels like to be silly and playful. So 3 minutes dancing. The next step is 3 minutes breath work. And whether you're doing this with yourself or with a partner, either way, and we have a breath work that we love, that we can also send people, but it's 3, 3, 3 for a reason. Again, it's baby steps because we believe in starting small. And if you're there and you're loving, you're having a great time, do more, but commit to 3 so that you actually do it and you don't let something else do instead. And then the third step is 3 minutes of eye gazing. And eye gazing is so powerful, can be very uncomfortable for people. And whether you're doing this with yourself or with a partner, you can do it in the mirror with yourself, which is also very powerful, and or with any partner. And that eye gazing is really important it looks like this. So you literally just like look at each other. And there's no talking, there's no laugh. I mean, obviously different people respond different ways. So laughter might come up, but then try and get back to a state of non-laughter. But it's left eye to left eye, and your left eye is your receiving eye. So it's just, some really cool stuff behind looking left eye to left eye. And you just look at each other for 3 minutes.
Yeah. There's a lot that can be said without words, and words can be limited. And it's so powerful. I'm writing a book about this. I've been studying it for years. And I remember like 6, 7 years ago, I was in Utah. Funny that Utah keeps coming up, and now that we moved here. But there was this mental health clinic that had like multi-million-dollar product, services, technologies, moving the needle in mental health for like severe depression, PTSD, anxiety, people going through a lot of stuff in their life. They had all walks of life, all different ethnicities. Like it was a great place. And it was at this mental health gala that Rachel and I were a part of. And I remember having a deep conversation at the end of the night with the CEO and founder. And I remember him telling me, he's like, about all the products and scans and this and that and the other, and they were all important. But he's like, you know what the number one thing that actually moves the needle, or like that actually like was breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough? And I was like, what was that? And he's like, eye gazing. And he's like, have you heard of it? And I was like, yeah, actually. And at that time I had done it maybe like 1.5 to 2 years with men's groups and things like that. And I was like, I love eye gazing. It's been very powerful for me. And he continues to go up. He's like, well, we do it for 5 minutes at a time. And he's like, we've been doing this for years. And he's like, no matter the sex, ethnicity, age, whatever, everybody breaks down. And they were collecting data over years, trying to figure out like, what was it that had people break down over and over and over. And so they started doing different surveys and questionnaires and getting feedback from people and interviewing them and everything. And as they collected it for years, there was a main through line. And that main through line was that everybody, these humans, these earthlings that we all are, they said that it was the first time in their entire life that they felt seen. And so along with our theme, right, if we talked about safety and does this person feel safe? Do this person feel seen, heard, and loved, right? These huge elements that if we practice, like we talked about connection fitness, how can we switch around our routines and habits as biohackers for Healthspan and Longevity? Now knowing Harvard did this and it's 80 plus years and it's like, oh, it's relationships. How can we tweak some things, whether it's with the 3-3-3 challenge or anything else that we talked about, to have time in the day to rep that, so that we can have better relationships with ourselves, others, world around us. And I think it's just it's so crazy, right? It's so simple that, connecting with somebody, really looking at somebody and not needing to say anything can be so profound. And it's just cool that like research and science and facilities like theirs and more are like capturing this and like, okay, well, let's, how can we put this together? So that's why we wanted the 333 challenge.
Yes.
And
that's also, it's so wild how many times, no matter how many times I've done it, beforehand, you always feel this bit of resistance. And I always love to tell people, like, expect resistance, like, welcome it. Yeah, it's going to be there. Yeah. Anytime you're doing something that's a little bit uncomfortable, you will feel it. And the more you frame it for yourself of like, and I talk to my stuff all the time. I'm like, okay, fear, okay, resistance. I feel you. I hear you. Like, it's okay to be here. You have a space here. Like, I'm grateful for you, but you're not driving the show. Like, you can hang out in the back, but like, I have to drive. And I think that's also really important too, to create. For most of my life, I try to like push away and I have to like overcome all my stuff. And a really big part for me was learning how to make space for all of our stuff, our fears, our anxieties, they play a really important role in our lives. And so rather than trying to be like, I'm gonna be fearless, no, like, you will always have fear. Like, learn how to dance with your fear, not like suppress and deny, because if you just suppress and deny, it will get louder and louder and louder. So anyways, I just always love to talk about expect it will be there, learn how to dance with it, and jump in. Yeah.
But these are the proactive, right? You really try to be proactive and prepare for the inevitable waves of life. Like, if you're proactive about this, just like we are about our brain health and physical health and gut health, like, because we're taking certain vitamins or nutrition or, certain technologies that we're doing daily, right? Like, to be proactive about this connection fitness with ourselves and others, I think it can go a long way. And it's great that science is starting to prove that out.
Yeah. I love with the emotions, dancing with it, because I love thinking about emotions as like, they're not good and bad. They're going to be there. And I've definitely experienced, like, if you do suppress an emotion, it will it'll bubble up at some point. So I love what you said about dancing with the different things. Sorry, Laura, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I know. We have so many things to respond to. And I love that about you driving in the car, like the parts work. It's like, if you get to know your managers and your firefighters, there's more ease, right? So such a huge lesson I learned from today is like the seek to understand can apply in so many different ways. And then I just wanted to say about the eye gazing. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but I've done it in many situations with strangers, and you instantly are like, oh, that's my friend now. Like, we're friends. We didn't say anything, but like, I know you, I trust you, I feel safe.
Yes.
So, wow. Big fan.
So awesome.
Well, if anybody wants to, we're gonna start a whole group thing about it. So if anybody of your listeners wants to join, they can just email us 333 challenge.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much.
What's your drop your email in and we'll put it in the show notes?
Oh yeah, it's just relationshiprenegates@gmail.com.
Perfect. Okay. We'll definitely put all that in the show notes. Well, I feel like the 333 is such a great, like, tangible piece of advice, because we always like to close out with like, well, what can people start doing right away? I feel like that's a really good one for everyone, but I'm going to still throw it back to you. Is there anything else you really want people to walk away with today that, like, hey, I'm going to start doing this today to optimize my health, well-being, relationships, anything?
Yeah, let me think. So many.
It's okay if not. Just,
well, I mean, definitely. Oh, good.
I'll say that quick. Yeah, I'll be like that. I mean, along with, I really hope people join us in our 333 challenge, as it is so freaking powerful and it's so simple.
Sets the stage for the day.
You know, and anyone listening to you, I think, you know, if you've listened this far and you're like, man, but I wanted like the quick pill. I wanted the thing that's like just gonna give me. I wanted the technology that's just gonna like give me the thing that I want. And I just hope that you get curious about that, because I had that for so long, and it took a good amount of struggle to get me to be like, oh, there's more to this. But I think if there's anything that you could do is play more. I think we really overlook this element of play. You know, one of our morning routines is literally called morning shenanigans.
Oh yeah.
And it is to pick up. Like, the one goal is to make the other person laugh, but you have to keep a straight face.
And say the most ridiculous things.
Like, just say
that don't make sense or that are crazy.
Yes. And just this concept of like waking up with play, you know, waking up and to find ways to create your own joy. So many times I think we're so focused on everything else and being adult and being serious and like, I have to like, you know, hit all my marks. I think play is really underrated and overlooked, because it also gets us in that state, especially if we're doing it with other people, where our body is just aging less and it's able to heal and do all these beautiful things. It has like more energy and capacity to do all the beautiful things it's supposed to do. So yeah.
The deep belly laughs of play and all that, 100%. And I need to be, I can get certainly challenged with that at times. And Rachel's really good about, getting me to dance in the middle of meetings or whatever, and just letting it all out. Or just because I come from corporate world, I feel like it's a past life of mine, but I was in the office crunching numbers like for 10 plus years. Like it's a practice to like, no, I do deserve to play. This is life. It's passing by. I'm going to be 90 years old, like in a blink of an eye. Like I should enjoy myself, others, and this world that we have, and that there is so much beauty around if we choose to look at that and focus on that. So I love that, babe. And I was trying to see if anything different came up for me or what was coming up in the present moment. Nothing was coming up, but given that we were talking about the emotions, and it'll bubble up later on, or being in the car and who's the manager and all that kind of stuff. When we talked about one of the big themes of like triggers are gifts, and we have a whole workshop and stuff that dissects why that is and how to go about it, and programs on this and all that stuff. But one practical tool that Juan Pablo talks about,
my trigger translator is Juan Pablo.
I'm her trigger translator, and it's this
Latin
lover, like yes. And I get really excited when she's like doing the work, and one thing that I tell her as her trigger translator is, it's 3 simple things. So first thing is, when you get triggered, the 3 steps is to smile, to say there's me doing it again, and then to feel the feelings. And a quick deepening of those is the reason why are we smiling? The reason why we're smiling is because it's simple to do. Oh, it's very simple. It's right away. It's the pattern interrupt. I get triggered, I smile. Well, when you smile, you're talking to a lot of the chemical and biological things of like you're smiling. There's some benefits to that, but also it's like loving kindness for yourself, because a lot of times in our self-development journeys to better our connections with ourselves and others and relationships, we can beat ourselves up. We're like the worst critic, and we like beat ourselves up, and that is just downward spiral. So loving kindness, catching it, being aware right away, smile. Second thing is, internally or externally, if you're in the car, you can say it out loud, or if you're by yourself, but saying internally or externally, there's me doing it again. The more specific, the better. Like there's me being passive aggressive again. There's me being so impatient. There's me not letting this other person talk. Whatever it is, stating it. And what that's doing is, those are the reps, right? That's the mental and emotional gym. That's like the observer getting like, oh, look at me over here doing this stuff, right? And the more that we become aware, the more that we can look at it and say, hey, you know what? I don't want to turn left anymore. I see it so bright now that your decision point is increased. The more reps, and you're like, whoa, I have more decision. I'm not reacting. Let's go right now. Right. And so there's me doing it again, the rep for the awareness. And then last but not least, welcoming the emotions, right? Like you said, Renee, it'll bubble up. It's like holding on, hiding, distracting, suppressing our emotions is like holding a beach ball underwater. And we're holding so many beach balls underwater, and it's literally, in a biohacking sense, taking energy away from us.
Yes.
Because we're holding all these beach balls. I'm like, oh my God. And once you just welcome the feeling, you sit with yourself and say, oh, anger, oh, and feel it, whatever the emotion is.
Yes.
When you feel it, it doesn't want to be there anymore. It's like, I'm out. It'll dissipate. It's just energy. It's just data. And when you feel it, it'll process through. It will leave your system. And then you're at a place where you can take a deep breath, reset, and then go on along your day. So smile, there's me doing it again, and welcoming those emotions, saying, I'm glad you're here.
Great advice. I'm glad that came to your brain to close it out. Awesome. You guys are amazing. Like I said when we started the episode, I love what you're doing, and definitely everyone listening, go email them, do the 333, and follow them on Instagram, because you guys have the best Instagram. Go all your pages. I always love when like a new reel pops up. You guys are just like bringing such humor and fun to some sticky things in people's lives. So I appreciate all that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're so grateful for you and the work that you're doing.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so important.
Yes.
And yeah, huge fans, huge advocates for Biohacker Babes. So thank you so much, Biohacking Babes. And we really wanted to also offer your audience, we really haven't done this before, and we'll see how it goes if we do it again with any other podcast. But we really just wanted to offer as much value as we possibly could, because we do everything that we do because we've been through it.
Yeah.
When we say we've been through the 10,000 toxic relationships and the hero's journey to get here, we are very serious.
Yeah. It's been 10,000.
Literally.
It's crazy.
That's impressive.
Figure of speech,
Yeah.
but it really is. It's been a lot to get here. And oftentimes I just wish so badly that people could really understand how far we've come, like where we've come from and how different we are. My past relationships would look at me and be like, how the hell do you have a relationship brand? You know what I mean? Like it is wild.
And so I've heard you guys speak, other times about past relationships and some of the things you have experienced and been through. It is pretty wild. So thank you for sharing all that.
100%, because I, really just want to give people hope that it is possible. And no matter where you're starting from, you can heal and you can learn, you can grow, and you can create whatever life you want to create. And I'm a huge believer of that, of proactively cultivating belief, because the first step is belief. If you don't believe it's possible, then it's not. And if you can learn how to cultivate that belief by surrounding yourself with the people that have done it, listening to, studying from, reading books, going to conferences, like reframing, rewiring, all that stuff over and over and over again, and proactively cultivate that belief is powerful. It changes the whole trajectory, the whole of what you're able to create in life. So wrapping that all up, because of our pain to purpose stories and how passionate we are, we really just want to give as much value as possible and help as many people as possible. So we wanted to offer your listeners literally a free breakthrough session with us. So 30-minute free breakthrough session with us. If you're interested, if you want to, again, just email us at relationshiprenegates@gmail.com, free breakthrough, and we'll send you the link to schedule the free breakthrough session. Like no strings attached, no BS. We're not trying to upsell people. Like it's literally just like, we want to help.
Here to help and serve. And and if they're interested in anything, we can point them in the right direction. There's lots of branches to Relationship Renegades, but if not, no big deal. We got a chance to serve somebody, and we know that ripples throughout humanity in such a beautiful way. And this is for singles, couples that are maybe going through a challenging time, that are maybe stuck with something, or maybe not sure about certain tools or ways of seeing things in relationships, or so anything that maybe if you're going through some type of pain, with yourself, others, or your relationships, we'd love to help. And so let us know. What's the email again? You probably said it.
Alrighty, just email us free breakthrough, like just one word, free breakthrough, to our email, relationshiprenegates@gmail.com.
Love to meet you.
Awesome. Thank you for offering that. That is so amazing of you guys. And we'll put that in the show notes so it's easy for everyone to remember.
Well,
thanks, guys. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for having us. Much love.
So wonderful. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. We'll see you next time.